Today, I'm building a mid-century modern coffee table with some amazing figured Clara walnut, and it's designed by artificial intelligence. Stay tuned. Earlier this year, a new lumberyard opened near me called Cali Hardwoods, and they specializes in these amazing figured Clara walnut. And I got me some of those amazing figured Clara walnut. A friend of mine just moved into a new house and she asked me to build her a coffee table. And so I thought, why don't I do that? However, I'm not very good at designing furniture, and one of the most important topics this year is artificial intelligence. With the rise of ChatGPT and other kinds of generative AI, I thought, why don't I try my luck there? So I used an AI called Midjourney to help me come up with inspirations and designs for this coffee table. Now, I don't want to write prompts, so I used ChatGPT to write a prompt for Midjourney, and I ultimately went with this one. After jointing and planing the lumber, I started working on the top portion, which is a box. The dimension of this coffee table, it's about 16 inches by 36 inches, and it's 16 inches tall. I'm using biscuits here to help with alignment during glue up. I don't have a domino. I would love to get a domino, but biscuits, it's fine. Add some glue and some parallel clamps, and away we go. I want to point out that the biscuits here are only for alignment purposes. They don't necessarily add any strength to the glue joint. The glue itself, wood glue, is already very, very strong, and it's actually stronger than the wood itself. I'm using clamps from both sides of the panel to make sure I evenly distribute the clamping force. Even though these are parallel clamps, they can still have differences in the direction of the clamping force. So doing this and make sure my panel is going to be nice and flat. And I'm seeing a lot of squeeze out. That means my joint is going to be very strong. I glue up 3 panels, one for the top, one for the bottom, and the third one will be cut in half, and those will be the sides. I'm using my Wen track saw to square up the ends and bring it to dimension. I really love this track saw. It's not the greatest track saw I ever made, but it gets the job done and it's really cheap. I then bring it to the table saw to square up the final edge to bring the top panel and the bottom panel to size. I'm getting a little carried away with this very thin strips of Clara walnut, but it's fun. Yeah, arms workout. Anyway, there's a lot of tiny cracks on the surface of the wood. They're very cosmetic. They're not very deep, so I thought I don't want to use epoxy to fill those in. Why don't I just use Starbond CA glue to fill the gap, and they work quick, and I can get through them, in 20 minutes or so. With the help of activators, I can work section by section, and they dry in like 15 to 20 seconds, and they're ready for sanding. For the center divider, I'm using a dovetail joint, a sliding dovetail joint to be precise. This is my first time doing dovetail joints on a piece like this, and I can't say it's perfect. I can only say it's an okay first attempt. So I don't necessarily want to give any instructions or tips on how to create this sliding dovetail joint, at least not until I'm getting better at it. So I'm just testing the fit here to make sure everything fits before I permanently attach it and glue it down. Oh, luckily it works. So after that stressful 45 minutes, I can move on to assembling the box. And my blood pressure came right back up when it's time to glue in this center divider. Hopefully, all those stripe fitting will pay off here. Yes. Although the joint is pretty tight, I still use some clamps to make sure the joints are really, really tight. Now I'm cheating because I'm using my CNC machine to create the legs for this coffee table. We all know that CNC isn't woodworking. Or is it? Anyway, I use the CNC to cut out the pieces for leg assembly. I then use my router table to clean up the edges and route off the tabs. I then did some very light sanding, and I also used my spindle sander to clean up the markings the CNC router has left on the sides. I'm using biscuits again to attach the legs to the frames, and the horizontal stretchers will go in this little mortise over here. I'll throw them into clamps and let them cure. Meanwhile, we can keep working on the top box. To reinforce the joint and to make it a little prettier, I'm using a dowel to do that. Initially, I wanted to get the same color of dowels from some kind of walnut to match the material I'm using here. But I ended up liking the contrast of a lighter wood dowel for decoration. So I guess it worked out. Now back to the legs. There's a section of rot and bark on this piece of wood, so I glued it up and I filled them with some tabletop epoxy. Now I'm just sanding off the excess epoxy here. After another pass of light sanding, I can glue in the horizontal stretchers to the legs. I think having access to a CNC machine really helps me in creating pieces like this with curves and angles and just different shapes. That's why I said it's cheating. I'm using the same method here to reinforce the joint and to add some decorations and visual contrast to the whole piece itself. The jig I'm using for creating this dowel is the Jessam dowel jig, and I really like it. It's really versatile. I'm using threaded inserts to attach the leg frames to the top box. So I'm drilling out a countersink or a recess for the bolts to go through. There's a lot of ways you can attach some legs to the table or a frame like this. Threading inserts is just something I have on hand. I'm already familiar with doing. By the way, I really love this countersink bit. It's really nice and satisfying, right? Another tip for using threading inserts is use an Allen wrench and use your hand. Some people also use CA glue or epoxy or thread locks to glue the threading inserts to the wood, but I don't think they necessarily add any strength, or I don't think any more strength is necessary, as the threading inserts themselves are already pretty strong. And the moment everything fits together is the moment my blood pressure comes down. Deep breath. I made the drawers with some plywood I have on hand off screen and put it in. The coffee table is slowly taking shape, and I'm dry fitting everything here before I do the details and finish. Even though there's still a lot more work to be done, seeing the piece slowly come together like this makes me really happy. Now, after a trip to the barber shop, I'm back in my own shop to create the roundover on the outside. Now, this is an extremely messy process and it creates a lot of dust and shavings, but the end result, it's really good. And with that done, I can move on to sanding the whole thing. And here's a detailed walkthrough of my entire sanding process. And to finish it, I'm using Rubio Monocoat. If you ask me why, because it looks good. But more importantly, because it smells good. Rubio Monocoat has a citrus-like smell and I really enjoy it. Some of the other more traditional finishes have some very, very gnarly smells that aren't necessarily very enjoyable, but I've always enjoyed working with Rubio Monocoat. It is really easy to apply. You just put on one coat, or monocoat if you will. You wait 15 minutes and you just wipe it off, or you can buff it in. For the top, I'm actually using 2 coats to really bring out the contrast in the wood and to even out the sheen a little bit. I think 2 coats on the top definitely looks better. And by now, my blood pressure has calmed down, and I even started to listen to some classical music. This has been a really interesting process going from AI generated design to physical product, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I hope you also enjoyed watching this video. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next build.